telling reporters this afternoon that more National Guard troops will be deployed to California if needed. Joining us to discuss, Republican Congressman Zach Nunn of Iowa. Congressman, thanks very much for being here. The former acting vice chief of the National Guard Bureau, the retired Major General, gave this statement to CNN. He says this, quote, "The president's federal deployment of the National Guard over the official wishes of the governor is bad for all Americans concerned about freedom of speech and states' rights. It tramples the governor's rights and obligations to protect his people. This is an inappropriate use of the National Guard and is not warranted." Do you agree?
Well, look, I've been a member of the National Guard, and we have seen this happen time and time again. The president has the right to move a National Guard unit from called Title 32 to Title 10 and federalize the force. You know, when COVID broke out, individual states stepped out because, candidly, we weren't getting the support we needed.
But this is the first time it's happened over the objection of a governor since the civil rights era.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that we saw the proof in the pudding here. The president moved when other folks weren't. And as a result, a sanctuary city, which wasn't holding these guys accountable, we had federal agents having rocks thrown through their window while they were driving. We had cars being lit aflame in the street. We had communities asking for help. We had a commissioner from the LAPD actually come out and say, hey, it's not what our elected officials here are telling us. This is now becoming a dangerous situation on the ground. The president stepped forward and said, I'm putting troops in there to protect the men and women in blue who are on the front lines doing this. And to have that backup with the National Guard there, I think was absolutely important. It may have prevented it from getting much worse this weekend.
We have reporting here at CNN that about 700 Marines are being mobilized to Los Angeles. You are a member of the reserves yourself. You've served in uniform for decades. Is this the right use of active duty Marines? Look,
I believe strongly in posse comitatus, which is a requirement that we're not using military forces against our own citizens. As a combat deployed veteran, I feel very strongly here that the use of our military should be to protect our country. But there also needs to be a protection of our country at our border, and tragically, in this case, potentially inside the country. Being able to back up our National Guardsmen, our law enforcement with military troops is not unheard of, and it's there to make sure that this doesn't get bigger. Here's what I know. I mean, you can talk to people in the media right now. In fact, I think CNN had it that these were rallies. Now they've become protests. I'm afraid that by tonight they become riots. If we don't have the ability to stand up and stop this violence before it consumes a great city like Los Angeles, then there's no telling where this could spread. The president is right to stand up and take a firm stance on those who would rather wave Mexican flags, start cars on fires, and protest illegals, 10 million of whom who came into our country, rather than stand up for the communities, the shop owners, the businesses who are actually living in these places like LA.
When we have seen riots before in this country, and certainly Los Angeles has dealt with this in its past, the National Guard has been able to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's different now?
In 1992, the last time that we saw the National Guard deployed to LA, there was mass uprising from this. Look, I think we're at a situation right now where we have a local government, a state governor, who's dramatically opposed to this. We have a sanctuary city in LA that refuses to stand with federal law enforcement. We have cops who are bleeding in the street.
Why is the National Guard not good enough, I guess? Why do we need the Marines?
Well, I think that active duty military is really the question here. It doesn't matter whether it's the Marines, the Army, the Air Force. The fact of the matter is we want to be able to back up the folks on the ground who are right now receiving rocks, fire, hit, bleeding in the street. There's no reason that we should be at a situation where we've had this kind of tumult and the LAPD saying their governor's not with them.
I'm just stuck on the National Guard not being enough to handle it. Like, why, for all the things we've seen in our country.
Yeah, Casey, I would say they're the most deployable force right there, right? I mean, so you've got Camp Pendleton right there. We're talking about proximity and the ability to refill. So I think that this is an absolutely appropriate use. I think you'll find that legally it's on that side. And if Congress needs to step in and grant this to the president, we should be able to protect these communities.
Would you be comfortable with a Democratic president doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've seen a Democratic president do this before.
Do you want to see President Trump invoke the Insurrection Act?
I think that we should have a conversation on how do we de-escalate. Now, at this point, because of the president's quick action, he's already moved in aggressively on this. But I am concerned that after tonight, this may spread to other cities. And as a result, guardsmen are part-time members of the community for the most part. Now, they've been treated horribly in LA, both by the governor, the mayor, and candidly, a lot of Californians, many of whom are actually members of the local National Guard there. We need to make sure that we recognize the law enforcement and the military members here are there to help protect the community. They're not the enemy of the people. And tragically, I've got members of Congress who are saying that right now, that law enforcement is not enforcing the law. Well, the reality is here we have a number of people who have stepped over the boundary and put people at harm in their own communities by doing this kind of very violent act.
You mentioned how Guardsmen members have been being treated. Gavin Newsom, the governor, put out on Twitter a story from the Chronicle. We're still kind of reporting out the details here, but the reporting from the Chronicle that there was not enough federal funding for these Guards members. They've had to sleep on the floor for this reason. What would you urge the president to do in terms of supporting the troops?
No, I think the president's already stood up and supported this. Now, here's the reality. The governor could have helped make these things happen. But at every step of the way, it's been a decision by the governor to try and fight against President Trump, I think, candidly, for his own political gain on this. The president also needs to be able to step forward. But here's what Governor Newsom should be doing. It's the same thing that I did when we deployed with our Guard, both in my elected capacity as well as my Guard capacity. Go out there and stand with your troops. Be there on the front line. De-escalate by being present in this environment. Don't be behind a microphone. Be out there with the men and women in blue and the men and women in fatigues and help your community heal at this point.
All right, Congressman Nunn, I know you have some legislation around China and agriculture and things that are very important, and we were originally going to have a great conversation about that. We've obviously had some breaking news today, so I really hope you'll come back and we can have a longer conversation.
I appreciate it, Casey. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for being here. All right, we'll be right back.
Well, with the best in military right now.